Welcome to Taking the High Road, a DriverReach and FreightWaves production. I'm your host, Reymer, founder and CEO of DriverReach. On this show, I interview industry experts and thought leaders who bring their insights to the driver lifecycle as we discuss the industry's greatest challenges, driver recruiting and retention. I appreciate the feedback we've received on the show. I just returned from ATA's mid-year management session and heard from so many people who shared how much they've enjoyed the interviews and conversations so far. Don't forget to rate and review Taking the High Road on whatever platforms you're using to listen. This week, I'm really excited to be joined by a veteran in driver recruiting leadership from right here in my backyard, Dave Chesterman, Director of Recruiting at Carter Express out of Anderson, Indiana. Welcome to the podcast, Dave. Great to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me today.
We are looking forward to chatting, getting some valuable insights as we get your view on the state of driver recruiting today. We'll learn what sets you and Carter Express apart, and we'll discuss the unique challenges the driver shortage brings. I'll also ask a question from a listener during the deeper dive segment. But before we go there, I'm curious, have you received your COVID vaccination yet?
I have. I am fully vaccinated as of May 21st. I think I had my second vaccination, so I'm in the clear at this point.
Well, congrats. It's a good feeling. I went through the same thing and a little emotional, honestly, that first kind of time. It's kind of a big deal as a history fan that I am. And it was great to be able to go to an event last week and feeling confident and comfortable, knowing that I had gone through that process. So glad to hear that and looking forward to kind of getting out a little bit more as the weather is improved significantly and we are all anxious.
Absolutely, yes.
Now you've led the recruiting departments of some pretty large companies, right? Celadon, Walmart. Now, obviously, with Carter Express, you were also recently recognized as Transport Topics Recruiting Professional of the Year. I'm just curious, what are you seeing today? What are your thoughts on the state of driver recruiting today? That's an open-ended question, by the way. I see.
Yes, it is. It is really hard. Driver recruiting, I don't think is ever easy, but it is even more difficult in this environment right now. Any article you read, we talk about driver shortage. Probably more on our side, we're seeing less application volume, less conversion. So pay raises. You almost can't read the news, the trucking news without seeing 5 more pay increases from carriers. So it is very, very hard right now.
Now, you mentioned fewer applicants, fewer conversions. How about the quality of the drivers who are applying? You notice any difference there?
I wouldn't say a lot. We're starting to see here probably in the last 4 to 6 weeks some more trainee inquiries. So guys and gals who do not have a CDL who are interested. So that is I'm hanging on to that as a positive. But for experienced drivers, I don't notice a huge difference in quality of them. Quantity's down, and I just think it's harder to convert and get folks to make a move right now.
A couple of follow-up questions there. Do you only hire experienced drivers, or do you put drivers through any sort of training yourself?
Yeah, we hire the full gamut, so we'll put them through training. We have a mentor program, mentee program for those with limited experience, and then the majority of our hires are experienced drivers. Now,
I know it is very hard. I mean, anybody that I've talked to, and I've been in this space for close to 20 years myself, and it's harder, certainly it appears, than I've ever seen it. What do you do with the drivers? The small percentage that you actually do end up being able to hire from all of those who apply. What do you do with the probably 95+% of drivers who you don't end up hiring?
Well, and I would assume this is true, from speaking to some other folks in the industry, that most of let's based on 100 leads, that the biggest percentage of those we're never making contact with. Not for lack of effort. We're calling, emailing, texting, smoke signals, showing up at their door, whatever we need to do, we're trying it. So we always have a pretty big group that are in that attempting contact that we're still reaching out. So that group we remarket to through email campaigns, text campaigns, call blasts, trying to re-engage with those candidates. Others, if they're qualified and they turn us down, we try to do the same thing. We stay in touch with them, and not as frequently, but touch base to let them, keep Carter on top of mind, and hopefully when it's time to make a change, they give us a call. And then you always have the percentage who don't qualify or don't live in the correct hiring area. So those you just they kind of fall off to the side.
Well, it's refreshing to hear you say that because you'd be surprised how many carriers out there who don't remarket, retarget, the drivers that have applied. And as I say all the time, I mean, there's two things that they have a CDL, which is important, but they all, especially if you don't train, but they're interested in working for you. That's why they applied in the first place. And so, having that going for you, I think it's really important to engage with them. Now, you mentioned smoke signals. You didn't mention carrier pigeons. And I might have just unlocked the secret right there for you. You're welcome.
I will give it a go.
So now, last year was tough, right? I mean, obviously as we know much more now than we did at the same time last year. Looking back, what was your biggest hurdle or challenge, in transition in 2020? I know you weren't with Carter then, but just from an industry standpoint, from a hiring and onboarding standpoint, anything you can speak to from a challenge or hurdles that you had to deal with the onset of the pandemic?
I think the biggest challenge was just the fear of the unknown. So, it was, we never know what the future holds, but this was a whole new wrinkle. And we had, you had a lot of drivers who stayed put with their current carrier, kind of afraid to make a change. You had carriers who furloughed drivers, which is, we look at it a year later, it just seems crazy that would have happened. So it was just that fear of the unknown. We couldn't predict the future, or couldn't even really kind of get a guide on it, get a guesstimate on it. So I think things are kind of leveling out now. Obviously, freight market's booming because of the driver shortage, and we're just kind of following that pattern. But I think we're going to free it up. Maybe another 8 to 12 months, things will start looking a little more normal for us.
Well, that'll be okay. I don't think anybody's going to complain about that. I do feel like the demand for drivers is not going to wane. I feel like we are, I remember in 2018 when things were booming and we were talking about driver shortage, and 2019 kind of lulled a little bit. But now I think it's back harder than ever. We have the clearinghouse that has removed, close to 60,000 drivers from the industry, which is good, but still that's a number of people who were actually in the industry, driving. Now, for the longest time, as I've, been in the space, attracting drivers who want local work has always been, they've always will, hey, I'm looking for something local. Do you have anything local? It seems like in 2020, and probably in large part because of the pandemic, it seems like that's something that is on their wish list, or what they really want more than before. Is that something you've noticed as well? Wanting to be home more often?
Yes, I would agree with that. I mean, through the years, that was always kind of the first ask from a candidate, right? Is, well, I want to be home more often. And that didn't always mean local. I mean, maybe they were working for a carrier that were out 2 to 3 weeks at a time and they wanted to be home weekly. But that local and home daily, and we get a lot of requests. Well, I'm going to be home every night. I don't even want to work nights. They want an 8 to 5 driving job. So that does seem to be more prevalent now. And as carriers, not just Carter, but other carriers, we're trying to make those adjustments. We're trying to be, adjust how our freight runs to accommodate as much of that as possible.
Well, I have a greater appreciation for truck drivers after I mentioned ATA's mid-year management meeting in San Antonio. I actually drove an RV, took the family out. It's a great water park there, but it's a 20-hour drive there, 20-hour drive back. Two 10-hour days basically, and it's pretty treacherous. I mean, that's a big piece of equipment you don't need a CDL for, and I'm surrounded by truck drivers and very conscientious of their where they are on the road and making sure that I, leave space and so on. But what a much greater appreciation I have for the work that they do every single day. It's impressive and much needed. So
yes, anytime I take a road trip, it refreshes my memory. Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. And I feel like everyone needs that every now and then to make sure that we fully appreciate what they do for us.
Well, and plus sometimes I see other people, in passenger vehicles driving around them, and I'm thinking, knock it off. You have no idea what you're doing. You're giving them no space, and you get, wedge yourself right in between two trucks, and I don't get it. But they just need some education.
Yes.
Let's talk about Carter Express now. Carter has a great reputation in the industry. I've known so many of the folks there for the longest time, being here in Indiana, being on the Indiana Motor Truck Association's board of directors. How has Carter adapted in 2021? Anything newly adopted that's here to stay?
Well, we've made some pay changes, driver pay increases with everyone. So we did one in the end of last year in November of 20, and we released a team pay package change in February, and just recently changed pay for our solo drivers. And with that, we made some adjustments to our vacation package. So our drivers can come in, they can earn vacation a little quicker versus waiting a full year. Uh, Again, it kind of drives around that being home more often and that more family feel. So those are some of the things that we've changed, as well as adjusting some routes, trying to turn more routes into a dedicated same driver, same route, same time every week route, because those are more attractive to candidates.
Sure, yeah, more predictable. Now, I know that you do a lot from a marketing and advertising standpoint, and I see a lot more social media. And I want to ask you kind of about what sets you apart, when it comes to, marketing and advertising efforts. But I also want to point out, when I see a Carter Express truck, it's pristine. It's beautiful. It's clean. That is clearly intentional.
Yes, yes. There's great pride taken in the equipment, and you're absolutely correct. I noticed the same thing even prior to working for Carter.
Right.
They wash them every day. Like what's going on there? They're great looking trucks. The red pops. It looks great. As far as the advertising side, kind of like the carrier pigeon, we're going to try everything. Social media is good. Trying to just look at every different avenue and kind of giving drivers and candidates a better look at Carter versus here's what we pay, here's the routes we have. So that's one of the things we're trying to be a little more open with that. Um, and you mentioned what sets us apart. One thing that's really refreshing is 35% turnover. Annualized turnover is like 35%. So I've been in situations in the past where I've battled 135 or more percent turnover. So this is a little different. But I started in February, and there's not a driver that walks by that two people, maybe three people haven't already stopped. They know his name. They ask how the wife is, and they have that background. It's very family oriented. They're very close to their drivers and take good care of them, and obviously that shows in the turnover.
Yeah, it does, and I think it's kind of self-fulfilling. Helps to keep that turnover low, and you can use that to your advantage and leverage that low turnover, because obviously if you have low turnover, then there's a reason for it, and that's attractive, to other prospective drivers as well. Now, you also have, I think you have a blog. Do you have a blog that Carter puts out? Or I should say a blog, a podcast, some communications to, is that to drivers or to companies or both?
It's more on the sales side. We we have a YouTube channel that we do for kind of internally for the drivers. We do that once a month, Carter Tube, so we can give them updates on pay changes, on when benefits are renewing, on whatever topic, and we always cover safety aspects in there. Operations always cover, so we do that to reach out, and it gets quite a few views. So we have the drivers follow that, and as soon as we release it, we always have some questions on some of the content, so we know they're looking, which is good. I mean, that's the whole point. So I'm of the school, we can't communicate enough. So if we have an issue in this area of safety, or if we have a customer that has special requirements, let's get every driver as much information as possible, and that'll make us all better.
Now, are you ready to take a deeper dive?
I'm ready.
Is now a good time? Okay. Well, this is where we'll take a question from a listener seeking expert advice. And the question is, truck parking and driver pay are big issues for drivers. How can we address these issues to better attract drivers? And anything about parking or pay? You've commented on pay. How about truck parking?
Well, it's interesting. Since the pandemic, there's been a lot more focus on professional truck drivers, and with that, part of the highway bill that was passed, they're trying to get some parking worked into that. We're trying to set money aside to add parking for over the road drivers, and that's awesome. And a lot of the general public, Jeremy, you and I have only been doing this for 100 years, so we take it for granted. But a lot of people don't realize that these drivers are out maybe 2 weeks at a time, and they're sleeping in truck stops, or they're sleeping in a rest area. They're living out of that truck, and I don't, a lot of people don't realize that. They just pass them and go on by and expect that their bread and all the other things they want to buy are there when they want them. So the pandemic shed some light on that, and that's a good thing. It was positive light.
And yeah, and I agree. It's for the last 2 years now, I think truck parking was near the top of ATRI's top 10 industry issues from the driver's perspective. And obviously, and driver shortage has been at the top for the carrier's perspective. And obviously, if we want to attract drivers better, then we should probably solve for what they are indicating is one of their biggest challenges. And by we, I mean, collectively, it's the carriers alone can't do everything, but we certainly need to make a concerted effort to improve that situation.
Right.
Yeah. Let's talk about what you look for in a recruiter. Are there any specific traits or qualities that you like to see?
Well, in the years, I've hired a lot of recruiters, and really it's personality. Can they build a relationship? Are they friendly, outgoing? Do they listen well? Right. So we want recruiters probably to listen more than they talk, which kind of seems contradictory, right? You want them on the phone selling, but to do that, they have to listen a lot more than they talk. But really, the personality thing, we can teach the nuts and bolts and what documents you need, and we can teach you this is how we sell this pay package. But I can't teach someone how to be a good person and outgoing and energetic. So that's probably the biggest thing on the list.
I love that you said listening. And I say that because, and first of all, it's a big part of sales. It really is. It's really important. And in fact, I just finished reading a book. It was Thursday or Friday of last week. And one of the comments in the book, it was about sales and being, really good, effective salespeople. And it talked about listening. And it talked about people who talk too much. You hear people say that, right? Like, that guy talks too much. You'll walk the other way to avoid engaging with somebody who talks too much. But you've never said, nor have you ever heard anyone say, man, that guy just listens too much.
Right.
You've never heard that. And
right.
So anyway, I think that's ingrained from hearing that statement. I think that's a keeper. Now, training or coaching recruiters, you participated in a video promotion of Exactly What to Say Driver Recruiting Edition, the book that's on either shoulder here. Have you incorporated any of those magic words into your ongoing, recruiter training or coaching? Is there anything that you use some of the contents of that book for?
Absolutely. So I've used it. I used it at Celadon, at Walmart. We used it, and we actually just within the last month or so started implementing it here at Carter Express. So my approach is get the book in their hands first. Let the recruiters have the book, read through it. It's a quick read. It's an easy read. You can't absorb it all at first read, is what I've learned. So I kind of give them that heads up and say, kind of read through it, get an idea of what we're doing, and then I send out meetings. We meet every week and a half, and it's Oprah's book club, not Oprah, but that's what it made me think of. And we get on a Zoom meeting and we discuss it. What worked, what didn't work, how did you work it into your conversation with a candidate, and then we do a phrase of the week, or a phrase for the next 2 weeks, what we want to try to work in. And like I said, we just started that. I know it works. I've used it in the past and have seen results with it. So I'm excited as we continue that journey with the book. But it's a great tool.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I'm really glad that it was Phil Jones who wrote that book, who engaged with us and said, hey, we should do something like this for the industry. You recall when he spoke at the R&R conference in Nashville, and that's when kind of I think he opened our eyes to, oh man, there's a lot of really good stuff here. There's such a parallel between recruiting and sales. So real quick before we've got to go, I do want to ask you, just from the driver shortage standpoint, there was a time when people said driver shortage and people say, that's not true. What do you think today? I mean, can we say that, yes, there is one and we need to do something about it? I mean, do you agree that there is one?
Absolutely. Yes.
What do you think we can do? Any thoughts on a silver bullet? Is there one?
I don't think there's a silver bullet. I think there's got to be a lot of things take place. There's not the magic potion that fixes it all. We have to do a lot of little things to make the gain. And it's with talk of 18-year-olds being able to drive over the road. That's encouraging. It's a little scary, but I think if managed properly with the correct training, I think that would obviously be a boost. I have a 21-year-old son, and he's not too far off from that when he was 18. And I think about it, maybe he wasn't the one, but some of his buddies could have done it. And I don't think it fits everyone at that age group, but the right situation, I think that would definitely work out. Industry-wide, I mean, obviously the pay, that's always a hot topic, and pay is going to continue to go up. We're not going to go back. Once you give a raise, it's really hard to take it back. So it's a little painful as we go through this right now, but long term, it will be good for the industry, and just the way the industry is viewed by the public. Again, the pandemic was terrible. It is terrible. I don't know. We're still in it, but it did give a lot of positive light to the driving professionals on the road, and I think taking that information and running with it and continuing to make sure that light shines on the hard work and how essential they are, not just during a pandemic, but just every day, what they're doing. I think that helps as well.
Yeah. Amen. And you're right. The 18-year-old, it's not for every 18-year-old for certain. If and when they end up passing and reducing the minimum age, it's certainly not for everybody. But I agree, training is critical, really good training. And I know that's part of what the Drive Safe Act, encompasses. So one final question. So do you anticipate attending any industry events this year? And I know the R&R conference was moved from February to November. Will you be attending?
I will be there. Yes, I am. It's funny because after being in the industry for so long, there for a while, it seemed like you had mats, and then a few months later you had this conference and then this conference and that conference and then this truck show, and it got to be like, oh man, I'm getting worn out traveling. And then after being stationary for a while, it's like I'm ready to get out and see some familiar faces and hear what everyone else is doing, and there's always good information there. It's always very well attended, great speakers. You can always leave there, whether you're a 500 truck carrier or a 3,500 truck carrier, there's something there that fits and will help you. So it's a very great, very good conference.
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree. I would expect it to be the best attended R&R conference they've ever had this year. I really would expect that, especially after coming from ATA's mid-year meeting, where that was the largest event they'd ever had. That mid-year meeting, close to 500 attendees. I mean, significantly more than any other one. And I think people are just chomping at the bit to get out. And to your point, the content is fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for joining me today. It's always great to see you. Look forward to seeing you again, hopefully in person, hopefully before November, before the R&R conference. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
And thanks for joining me for another episode of Taking the Higher Road podcast and for spreading the word to your industry peers. We really appreciate it. Remember to follow along at driverreach.com/podcast. And please submit any questions or comments, including those which may appear on upcoming deeper dive segments, at podcast@driverreach.com. And don't forget to rate and review the Taking the Higher Road podcast on whatever platform you listen. Until next time, thank you for taking the higher road.